Let's start slowly then. I would like to welcome all of you, and I would like to welcome all the audience today, representing MENTEE as a global mentor for MENTEE. I've been working with MENTEE for a while now, and today it's really exciting and amazing to be with you. And this is our fourth MENTEE Global SDG Discussion, Happiness and Wellbeing, supporting SDG 3 in the Middle East and North Africa. My name is Yesim Engin. I'm an executive leadership and team coach and global mentor for MENTEE. For those who are new to MENTEE, we are a global nonprofit that brings mentorship to other people around the world and knowledge sharing with mentees who are localized around the world. And we have so many volunteer global mentors working with us, and we do our professional development sessions, and we do a partnership with other NGOs and institutions. And today, our topic is happiness and well-being. It's really exciting, especially after such a difficult time that's never ending, we feel. So today our moderator is gonna be Nadine. She is also a global mentor for MENTEE, and she has so many titles I cannot list here. She's a mother of two. She has gone through amazing experiences to develop herself, and she's a speaker, facilitator, working for different groups around the world. And over to you, Nadine. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Yesim, for that. I'm very happy to be with you here today, and I'm very happy to have our amazing panelists. For us, in terms of happiness and well-being, I think it's a very important topic, especially with the pandemic. It came to our attention all the world over is that people are starting to have concerns with regards to, mental health and well-being, and it's becoming now really a priority in the agenda. Usually most of the discussions that are happening around well-being are resilience and well-being. It's definitely very important to be resilient, but we were thinking of taking a different angle and looking at also happiness, because happiness can definitely contribute to well-being. So today, without further ado, I would love to introduce our amazing panelists today. So we have Rima. Rima is a psychologist. She received her license in general psychology in 2019. She's finishing her clinical psychology, her master's in clinical psychology currently, and she has worked in psychology field for almost 2 years in different organizations. Rima is also one of the amazing mentees that we have in MENTEE, and she has a big passion to work with people and the overall human well-being. Shaden Khallaf, unfortunately, is not with us today. She's not feeling well. And it's very, it's very in line with being well-being, is that when you're not well, we need to speak up and say that. However, she has shared with her thoughts. I'll introduce you to Shaden. Shaden Khallaf is an advocate for human dignity and women's empowerment, and she's an international expert in humanitarian development affairs. She's currently serving as a senior policy advisor for the Middle East and North Africa and at UNHCR. She leads regional policy analysis and design around some of the world's most protracted and complex displacement situations. Shaden was selected as a Perry World House Visiting Fellow at the University of Pennsylvania and has been a fellow at the Graduate Institute of International Development Studies in Geneva. Shaden was also selected among 100 AUC alumni of the century, as well as Women of Egypt Hero, and chosen among 365 inspiring Arab women by Women in Business Arabia. We are sad that you're not able to be with us, Shaden, but we have this recorded and we will be sharing your thoughts. I'd also love to introduce Adel El-Huni with us. Adel is the Director of Growth Innovation at Robots and Pencils. He has moved seamlessly between private, public, and social sectors in his career, which is quite global. Adel's expertise has been leveraged by Facebook, IDEO, EY, and the Dubai government, among others. He has recently been selected as part of the Leadership Accelerator at RARE with Google. He was also selected as an Aspen Ideas Festival Scholar in 2018 for his work with refugees, and honored with the Prince Al Walid bin Talal Philanthropy Fellowship in 2010. Adel, it's a big honor for us to have you with us. Welcome to the panel today.
Thank you.
I would also love to introduce Shama. Shama, her name is inspired by Shama and Shams, which is basically candle and the sun as a symbol of light. She's an Egyptian health and wellness mentor. Shama is Egypt's first Kundalini yoga teacher, Kundalini yoga teacher and Aquarian teacher trainer, and the first lead trainer in the Middle East and North Africa. She is certified from the Kundalini Research Institute in the United States. She is passionate about supporting refugee communities. She has given talks and trained refugee women in camps in Jerash in Jordan, Bethlehem in Palestine, Lesbos Island in Greece, and currently Shama is working with Al-Fanar Venture Philanthropy as an advisor to women of small business. Welcome, Shama. It's a real pleasure to have you with us here today. I would like to start off the discussion about, the discussion about happiness and well-being. I think, like I mentioned, with COVID, we've always been thinking about human being. Are we human beings or are we human doings? I think right now, all of a sudden with the pandemic and when all the markets were closed and the countries were closed, we were forced to become human beings, not doing. And I think that's very important that we come to think about how are we dealing with that? And all of a sudden we were, having emotions that we're not really able to deal with. And I just wanted to tap onto, have you noticed that emotion, it actually has motion, the word motion in it. And the key thing with emotions is that we need to let them flow within our body, accept them. There's no good or bad emotion. There's no labeling. So it's very important to have the emotion moving within the body. And if we don't, what happens is that you have issues with your well-being and your health, and that would be an issue. So I would like to ask you currently with the attendees that we're having, if we can have a quick poll, you think you can bring it up. How are you currently with your level of happiness and well-being? How would you rate yourself? So until we have the poll coming up, I know that you will be doing that. You should be having it coming in right now. So very important, we need to feel our feelings because sometimes we're not very comfortable on doing that. I realized that Adel has been working with the Dubai government, and it's worth noting that we have the only Ministry of Happiness that we have in the Middle East is in Dubai, and they are rated number 28 happiest country in the world. So please, if you could go ahead and tell us how would you rate yourself on your current happiness and well-being status. So until those come back, I'll just continue mentioning in terms of the UAE is number 28 worldwide, and it's the number 1 in the Arab world. They do have the happiness ministry, and recently they've also made this great decision of moving the weekend rather than just having it 2 days to having it 2.5 days for the government. So they'll be having half of Friday and Saturday and Sunday. So basically what the results of the poll are quite interesting is that it's more or less, let me share the results with you so you can see it. Okay, were you able to share the results?
Yes, I think you must be seeing now.
Okay, so we have 33% to say it could be better, 33% it's okay, and 33% are feeling I feel great. So it's good to know where we are, and it's very normal that we are in any of those positions at any one point in time. So I would like to start the discussion. Shama, if I may ask you, what is your definition of happiness?
Thanks, Nadine. Just doing a sound check. You can hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you fine.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think it's an interesting question. I think happiness tends to be really personal, and we often link it to achievements or desires that we have and reach. If we want something and we get it, then it creates a happiness. And of course, there's pleasure. There are things in life that give us pleasure, whether it's a bar of chocolate or ice cream or a hug from a loved one, or, that warm, cozy home, whatever it is. There are some things that we tend to focus on, and we think that when we have that, that is happiness. But the question is that really true happiness? Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you for that. And what, when it comes to well-being, how would you define well-being, and how are they related, happiness and well-being?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, I think well-being is the ability to feel an inner sense of calm and peace, and strength that is able to carry you through life, regardless of the challenges that are happening externally. And so the connection of happiness and well-being, I tend to feel in my personal life, if I'm complaining all the time, if I'm wanting things and not getting them, I tend to be a little bit grouchy and grumpy. And that affects my well-being, because I feel like, why aren't I getting? Why aren't I achieving? Why am I failing? Why? So in a sense, if I begin to flip the switch and start to focus on the moments of joy in my life, right? Then that will boost my well-being, because I'm no longer looking at my have-nots and what's not working, but instead I'm celebrating the little tiny haves. Like, oh my God, I was able to cook a little pie today and it tastes okay. That's great, Yeah.
I love that. I've studied something called attractor field. So basically, if we are in the mode of complaining, then you're energetically attracting more things that would lead you to complain. And if you are looking at the things that are the simple joys of life, like you said, and the wonders of life, you'll be seeing more of that. Just like if you haven't noticed, if for those who wives were pregnant, or they got pregnant, and you're noticing when you're pregnant, you're only seeing people who are pregnant, or when you bought a new car and you suddenly see everybody's having that new car, or a new dress or something, you'd that's part of the attractor fields that we would have. So Rima, if you'd like to also tell us how would you define happiness and well-being, we'd love to hear from you.
Hi, Nadine. My greetings to all. Happiness can be defined differently to every person. For me, happiness to be with my family. Maybe to others, happiness is to find a job. It's not related to a specific thing, and you can't just define happiness. It's not constant, and it changes with time. Like, happiness for little kids is to buy a lollipop. Happiness to this same kid when he gets older is to enter school, or to play with his friends. So yeah, it is not constant. You can find like 1,000 definitions if you ask 1,000 people.
Thank you for that, Rima. I'd like to introduce to us the definition, the Oxford definition of well-being, which is basically the state of being comfortable, healthy, or happy. And obviously, just like Shama and Rima mentioned, it varies from one person to the other. It can never be a one-size-fits-all. What makes you happy is not necessarily what makes me happy, but it's a state. And one important thing is that it's also a fleeting state. It's not necessarily something that stays with us all the time. We can be happy one day and another day we're sad, and we just need to embrace that. Embracing our feelings and letting you feel your feelings will ultimately lead to a happiness and having a general overall well-being. Rima, I have another question for you. I would like to know from you, what are the current challenges that we are facing in the region that put this concept of happiness and well-being at risk, that are not making it easy for us?
Yeah, I believe that happiness can make a major progress in our communities. In fact, I believe with no happiness, nothing can work well. When you're truly happy, everything else falls into place, including your career, relationships, and family. That's exactly why our topic is so important, because it's related to everything. But of course, we are facing a lot of challenges right now in our region. And I'm going to mention two of them, actually. The first challenge, you already mentioned it, COVID-19. COVID-19 is one of the basic challenges in our region and the entire world, actually, in addition to its impact on our physical life, of course. Being restricted with a virus for almost 3 years now is stressful and affects our well-being. We are not as free as we used to be. We are not doing the activities that we used to do before this pandemic. The activities that gives us joy. Uh, we used to do activities that lower our stress and anxiety from our daily struggles. So yeah, COVID-19 is one of the basic challenges to decrease our happiness. And although many of the SDG 3 indicators were moving towards the correct direction before this pandemic either froze the progress or inverted it. So yeah. And the second challenge, I believe, economic crisis. I will mention it because personally, I'm living in Lebanon, and we are facing a huge economic crisis here, and I know how it affects our well-being. In general, economic crisis is expected to produce secondary mental health effects that may increase suicide. And I want to mention that in Lebanon in 2020, 147 people died from suicide. 57% of them are between the ages of 18 and 29. So this gives us an idea on how economic crisis can affect our happiness and affect our hope in living. So those are two basic challenges in our region, and facing them will definitely help our communities make the progress it needs to reach SDG 3 by 2030.
Thank you, Rima, for that. Adel, I would love to hear from you about what do you think are the current challenges?
Yeah, no, I just want to piggyback off what Rima was saying. It's interesting that for our region specifically, if we want to just place the importance of happiness and well-being, there's one incident that happened around 2010, 11, which was the Arab Spring. And it was because of one person that committed suicide in Tunisia. And the underlying effects were happiness in that society, the well-being of people, right? Economic factors. But if you want to think about the importance of this topic for our region or globally, that's one moment. It just, when she was talking about suicide, it just drove to me the importance of that, right? If people just set that aside, and right, and you had a whole swath of youth, of some of it related to the male population, some to the female population, but it was a collective that came together and tried to strive for a better life, which meant they wanted to be happier, they wanted to have better belt, the basics, right? But in terms of just key factors for happiness and well-being, I'll take a bit of a different angle. That for me, having grown up part of my life in the Middle East, part in Europe, part in the US, that I always felt in the portions that I was, whether it was in Libya or different parts of the Middle East that I had lived, visited, that there was a sort of this concept of things are meant to be, right? That the control of your life, and again, being whatever religion, if you're spiritual of this, that things are meant to happen the way they're meant to happen, and then your control of your happiness and stuff should be more on the spiritual side or family or something away from you. And what I learned more in the West is that though you can a bit design your own life, design your own fate a bit, or at least in that combination, and that can also dial up or down your happiness. And the other thing, I would say a major challenge, or I don't know if it's a major challenge, but at least something that stood out to me is this inability, at least for the male side of the equation, to speak about emotions, to be more empathetic. And is that seen as a weakness? And that's maybe culturally in the Middle East, maybe parts of Latin America, this machismo culture, right, that we had growing up, maybe shifting. And so that left me in a position, for example, that you couldn't, if you're not dealing with your stuff in an emotional fashion, that can come out in negative ways. right? That can come out in anger, in violence. It can have effects in gender-based violence. It can have all other under effects, right? Violence with your children.
True.
Because we accommodate everybody right around us because of our culture. We're very non-confrontational, and we smile, and then when you come home, sometimes you take that off on the people you love the most, right? Your mental and what you sort of, and this maybe doesn't only apply to me, but you release everything and you become your quote unquote raw self. And who deserves that most, right? Is it the family that deserves that side of you, or is it the world that deserves that side of you? And when you get home, you're supposed to be actually more attentive, trying to seek and help happiness and well-being of your children, of your partner, of etc. So I thought that dynamic is interesting with us as well. Yeah,
that's very, very interesting and very important. So how, because like I mentioned, emotion is motion, movement of motion. So anger is a very important feeling, and how you just mentioned about the male population and how they're struggling with regards to dealing with your emotions, and then it can come out into, like, if you're basically, if you're locking all your emotions just like in a bottle, because you drink, it will pop up, or like at a volcano, it will explode. So what do you think would be the way forward to address this for men who are with our culture, that this is emotions, they are kind of like some kind of taboo to show them, although they shouldn't be. However, that is the way it is. But how would you see it moving forward, and how can we address this issue?
Yeah, and I mean, for me, one key thing is, and what I've seen work in other societies, but and it's part of sort of the mentee model, right? Is having role models, right? We always look to individuals that whether in your immediate family, friends, or that can act as that role model of showing, right? One example we gave was, and I used this example before, not that it's directly related, but gender-based violence is a big issue globally. In certain parts of the Middle East, it's even higher, right? But the idea was we can tackle that from an angle of providing support for women, which is critical, right? Safe places, safe zones, but then the root of the cause comes back usually, right? Unless it's the other way around, to the men. So how can the frame of mind of not necessarily happiness or well-being, but look at this concept and being able to share openly of what you're doing that. And the role model became through something that men already do, which is, for the most part, at least Muslim men would go Friday to the mosque and pray. And who's a role model? The sheikh. And can the sheikh speak about gender-based violence? Can he speak about, right, topics that can sort of shed, right? And so that's a way of of involving yourself in somebody else's boat, as opposed to forcing it as a policy, as a topic, which is very important. I'm just using that as an example, right? But more often than not, me from mentees have been men, women, have been people in my family or not. I'm just using that as an example of, in our society, where sometimes we view things hierarchically, right? That a voice coming from a spiritual leader is different, right? Whether that's your priest, whether that's your, rabbi, whether that's your sheikh. For the male population, that's an interesting perspective, I thought.
That's very interesting. Thank you, Adel, for that insight. Shama, if you can please let us know, what do you think are the current challenges that we're facing? And how would you recommend to, overcome them?
Thank you so much, Nadine. I think the external challenges have been with us since the beginning of time. There are always challenges in the external environment, whether it's poor weather conditions or, governmental decisions that are causing pain or famine or, deforestation, the deaths of loved ones, stress, pressure, uncertainty. Like, the external challenges have been there throughout time. And the challenges are absolutely increasing. There is no doubt. We feel like time is moving much, much quicker. But I think our main enemy is the way we relate to our mind, because our mind tends to work in contrasts. It tends to work in happy, sad, good, bad, right, wrong, pleasure, pain. And when we get happy, we tend to fly really high. So if you look at my hand, you go up really, really high with the happiness scale. But then when you're not achieving that happiness, when you're not feeling that happiness again, you do the opposite. You go right to the bottom. And then your mind asks, why don't I feel this again? When will I feel this again? When will I get it again? And that makes us sink lower and lower into the sadness. So actually, the practice of meditation brings the mind into equilibrium. So instead of having these huge jumps, like, imagine being on the 40th floor of a building, like I'm that happy. And then suddenly you're rock bottom in the basement, So the practice of having a regular meditative practice trains your mind rather than to jump up and down. We experience, rather than bursts of happiness, we experience joy. We experience contentment. And those surges of up and down, rather than having huge movements, it becomes much more stable. So the movement is not so radical, right? And that means we have less pain and we have less of that pendulum flip, right? So that's one thing in terms of the mind. So if you ask me, I would say the tool we can use, and everyone can do this, like starting right now, is to meditate, to learn to meditate, and to meditate every day for at least 3 minutes a day, right? And then the other thing that I thought of, two things I thought of as you were speaking. One is breathwork, pranayama, because breathwork really helps release emotions that are pent up, Simply doing an alternate nostril breath, breathing in through the left nostril, exhaling through the right nostril, that releases a lot of emotions and brings the left and right hemispheres of the brain in balance. When they're in balance, my masculine is in balance with the feminine, my giver is in balance with my receiver, my analytical, overthinking, overplanning, problem-solving brain is in balance with my more sensitive and emotional side and creative side. So when we create that balance in the brain, we to feel more balanced, and we can see things with a more balanced perspective. And the last thing is movement, moving the body, whether it's running, walking, dancing, having the habit of consistently moving the body, again, to release excess energy, to bring us in our center of power, right? To create a heat in the body that improves our heartbeats, a circulation of the blood, functioning of the organs, distribution of oxygen to the brain. And that means we feel healthy. And when we feel healthy, we feel happy.
Beautiful. Yeah. I love it. Movement is definitely one, breath work and meditation. And meditation, there has been research on the fact the most successful people are those who meditate. So there is, there's so much truth to that. And I hope that our participants will take these to heart. One of the things, I recently did this happiness course that I'm as a happiness coach. And one of the interesting activities we were asked to do is to count our smiles. So if you take the day and notice how many times are you smiling? And interesting enough, adults normally wouldn't smile maybe 15 times during the day. But if you come to take children who are more in touch with their inner joy, with their inner spirit, they can go up to 300 times a day. So I invite you all to count your smiles. How many times do you really smile? And it is contagious. If you are smiling, remember the attractor fields, you're actually attracting more reason for you to smile. And so smiling can go a long way for that. And singing, not many people like to sing, or, playing with drums. Shama, you had mentioned earlier to me that we could, if you can make musical instruments from rocks or plastic bottles, whatever, and you actually try to develop something that will definitely put you, it is a kind of movement, and the sound, there's some, sound therapy is great for that. So thank you.
And just on that note, Nadine, the tribes of Africa, you'll find many tribes that the way they get together, even having, almost nothing, very little food, very little water, like really nothing. But the way that they raise their vibration is just to, come together and sing and chant and move their body and use the beats to the barks of trees or whatever. And that, in their eyes, you see the joy and you feel the joy. And so that's something we can create from nothing,
So true. So true. So Rima, what would you think are some of the things that we can do to help address issues and help people with have more happiness and well-being?
Actually, Nadine, I believe free mental health programs can work, because here people still in our culture still think that emotional support and going to therapy and asking for help for their emotions is still a luxury. So I think when you start it in a for free, especially for men, I talked about men because men don't tend to pay for themselves. They here in our culture tend to care about their families, and they totally forget that they are part of this family. They should take care of their personal health. So free mental health programs, engaging those programs in our education, teaching our children from a young age that they should take care of their personal health, teach them to meditate from a young age, because it is simpler when they are in a young age to meditate, to focus on this moment, not to think about the past, about the future, just focus on this moment. Teach this to our children. And I don't think there's a big number of children in our culture that know what the meaning of meditation. They don't know what that means. So yeah, I think those can help as a first step, because we are still at the beginning. People still thinking about their basic needs, their food, their how to get to their basic needs. They are not thinking about their happiness, about their well-being, about their joy. They are still thinking about their basic needs. So I think those can help as the first steps.
Thank you, Rima. And that will lead me to, I'll read what Shaden had shared with me with regards to mental health responses to displaced persons in MENA. She wrote, with the onset of COVID-19 pandemic and the emerging health and socioeconomic crisis, UNHCR has included MHPSS as a cross-cutting component of the response in UNHCR's protection with regards to health and solution response. So the new needs in relation to COVID were addressed in 2020 as well as ensuring that refugees and IDPs with pre-existing conditions could have access to mental health. So in Morocco, for example, the UNHCR's partners developed dedicated hotlines to provide psychosocial support to refugees and asylum seekers. For people of concern in need of specialized services, online consultations with a psychologist were also available. UNHCR also set up a specific hotline for women in need of psychological support while in confinement due to COVID-19 movement restrictions, which further helped identifying cases of gender-based violence. And obviously with this gender-based violence, not necessarily in Morocco, as Adel had mentioned, after COVID, generally speaking, gender-based violence has increased significantly globally, and even divorce rates as a consequence has also increased a lot. In Iraq, they have, during the COVID-19 outbreak, when lockdowns meant that the psychiatrists and counselors were working for the MHPSS unit, had little or no access to the camps. Trained community workers, many of them who are refugees themselves, provided vital mental health support in northern Iraq. For those the community workers could not reach during lockdowns, the UNHCR and partners prepared key messages on mental health and well-being, communicated during interactive live radio broadcasts. Furthermore, the UNHCR staff provided training on remote psychosocial support during COVID-19 pandemic to the helpline operators of the Iraq Information Center, a nationwide intra-agency humanitarian telephone service that provides information and referral assistance to IDPs and refugees. So obviously there is a lot that can be done, and there's more that needs to be done. So that comes to another question. So I would like to ask Adel, what do you think can we have, whether be it the philanthropy sector or the government sector or any entities, the corporate, what do you think was required for them to help with this current issues that we're having to, elevate the issues and the challenges that we already discussed, and so that we have everybody thinking about their happiness and well-being. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, that question, right? So if you look at statistic of some of the societies that have, or communities, right, longevity in life, right, that some of the indicators are happiness, well-being. Some of these are in the most remote parts of the world, right? We've heard the stories about a certain village in Greece or in Japan, right? And they thought it was diet, right, which has something to do with it, but it's a lot about waking up every morning and having the same people around you and saying good morning and smiling and the sense of security, and right. And I think if we go back to sort of not being nostalgic, but go back to the days of you know, I'm a Gen Xer. When I grew up, right, there was a tree that I used to climb. There was the neighbor I used to know. There was, you know, the local baker that I used to visit, and sort of this idea of a simpler life, which is very, very far away from how we live now, right? Especially over the last 18 months, where we're also cooped up, and not only sort of reacting to our work and bringing life. The work-life balance became sort of just one integrated form of being right now, right? And so when I looked at sort of some solutions and some projects that I've been involved with government and different, I'll give you the example of what we did with, you know, there was part of it Ministry of Happiness in Dubai, part of it Dubai Future Foundation, but the idea was looking at human-centered design. How can we bring sort of, how can we find solutions, right? With young tweens and what they call the pioneer generation, the plus 60 generation. How can we bridge that gap between them? So that connection between the youngest of generation and the older, because the idea was the busy people are going to be busy, right? They can try to meditate, which is good, try to do this and that, but eventually they're going to be busy. So who's left on the sidelines? Usually the parents and then the youngest children, right? They're going to, but what if we connect them in a way? And how did we start doing that? Or how did we start finding solutions? It took, again, government initiative, private sector consulting, and ideas like human-centered design, right? And all we did was create summer camps to identify from the kids what is the things that they saw in their future that made them happy, that made them scared, that made them sad. And in a summer camp environment, it wasn't a focus group asking questions, just letting them play, doing creative work with them. And the things that came out is unbelievable, because these kids at that age, from let's say 10 to 13, some of the results came that they were looking at climate change issues. They were looking at racism. They were looking at like this negative views of society, because that's what we were echoing to them, right? That's what they were seeing in the media, as opposed to being just kids, right? Thinking about the future of rockets and just amazing, right, inventions. The other hand, we did a study with some of the older generation that again in the West is dismissed in sometimes, right, put it in homes. In our cultures, traditionally they would live with us and part of our community, and they're the central, right, the matriarch or the patriarch or whatever. And so we did it again with Emiratis, locals that were between 60 and 70. And again, just to show you how they look at them, they call them the pioneer generation, right? Not the plus 60s or the. And it was amazing because there's a thirst to communicate. There's a thirst to share stories. There's people like a Hajja, which is, you know, that was wearing her local garb and her look, but it turned out she's always wanted to be a poet, and she had these stories she wanted to tell. But the point I'm trying to make is when you meet people where they're at, and then reverse engineer policies from there and start doing projects together and doing storytelling sessions and going into the community centers that are already there and creating programs based on what the tweens wanted, based on what the older generation, right? It became such a powerful example of a government leading, bringing private sector, right? Bringing and talking the talk, so putting funds behind it, not just saying, hey, this is a policy and the corporate should pay the CSR bill for this. No, everybody put their fair share. And the project became systemic. And from there, a whole foundation was created that was not only looking at happiness, at the future of education, at socioeconomic development. And that was just an example, right? And the last thing I would say was that they funded it for a 5-year period. It wasn't like this foundation within the UAE was going to look for money and start begging corporations or individuals. No, here's 5 years, you wake up doing exactly what you're meant to be doing, which is solving societal problems, right? The wicked of them. And let's now, if that's done well, let's extrapolate that to other case studies, or use that as a case study to extrapolate to others, right?
That's brilliant. And it's lovely to see, because end of the day, all of the work they've done in the UAE have brought them to being the number one in the Arab world in level of happiness, number 28 globally, which is really quite something. And I do hope that they are definitely role models in the Arab world, and I do hope that other countries will start looking into this and looking into having a Ministry of Happiness to look into what are the policies that they can have from the government side that can help and enable happiness and well-being for everybody. Rima, if you have any ideas on that you'd like to share, please let us know. So you're muted. So you're muted. You're still muted. Yeah, Rima, can you hear me? Okay, so Rima froze there for a second. Okay, so until the connection with Rima, I would like, Shama, I would like to ask you, what would you like to see by 2030 in the region when it comes to happiness and well-being? What's your vision?
Thank you for the question. I never really thought of it, but I think the first thing that comes to mind is that everyone learns to meditate, and recognizes the importance of moving the body, not in the sense of competitive sports, because I do think that there's a rise of importance of sports, but they're becoming competitive, which actually puts this achievement and reaching a top. More about like the freedom and the importance of moving the body to the freedom of life and the freedom of flow. And I really like what I think it was Adel who said this, that if kids are getting so impacted by hearing the negative news of the world, and they're not being inspired by their parents to dance, to laugh, to listen to music, to play instruments, to sit in nature and watch the birds sing, then that's a real shame. And the question is, how can we as parents of the next generation find simple joys in our life, joy that doesn't require money, right? Joy that money can't buy. Because if we start to create that in our lives, then the children can begin to watch and see and create that in their lives, So I think it starts with us. How can we create joy that money can't buy every single day of our lives? And for each person, it's going to be different,
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'd like to quote Paul McGee. He wrote a book called The Sumo Guy, and he says, well-being leads to well-doing. And I just fell in love with it because it's so true. When we are in a state of well-being, therefore you will end up doing well-doing. And this is really integral, that in all our things, like you said, Adel, it needs to be, whenever looking into things, we look at it holistic. So yeah, happiness is free. It's an internal thing. It is something that it's how you react to your situation that you're in, and realize what's within your circle of influence and circle of control. You need to distinguish the things that are outside your control. They're outside of your control, but how I react to the situation I'm in, that is the basics of the secret to living a content. You're not going to be happy all the time. Nobody's happy all the time. We don't want that. That's not the whole idea. The whole idea is that we are content and having a healthy, well-lived life with in terms of well-being. So I would like to, ask them all. I think we're more or less, I know if you might have some questions or what have you before handing it over to Yesim, but I would like to just have maybe everybody, each and every one of you, say your final thoughts and your final take about this very important topic that we're discussing today. So we could start with Adel.
Yeah, sure. I was gonna just before I say some final thoughts, I was just gonna align with something that Shama that really resonated. That when you're present and doing things, I'll give you an example. With my kids, I always notice that they're fighting, right? 3 boys, 4 years apart, and they're fighting about a material thing, a screen, something happened. When you're in that environment where they're, and they stress, right? They're playing video game and it's still like you're hearing somebody yelling. And then I tell them, don't get on screens. And when I get them off screens, I'm on the screen. And this whole dynamic, right? Which everybody somewhere or now will resonate to this, right? And this idea of going inside a place, a store where strategically they put all the kid items at eye level, right? And you're struggling. No, you can get this. You're negotiating. You're reacting, and they're reacting with you to the world that's just wants them to be consumers, right? From day one. And juxtapose that or compare that to taking them to an environment that's nature, right? So the moment I took them away from screens, I wanted this, and we're in the park, and I'm making up stories, especially when they're younger, about, there's dragons here, there's magical worlds, and I play stuff, and there's such an abundance in nature that conflict dissipates. That there's sand, and sand won't run out, and sand you can play with it tomorrow, and it's gonna be there forever. And there's trees, and you can climb, and it's a whole different vibe. Just me looking at it and feeling that sense of, oof, this is good. Now the idea is how do you do that regularly? How do you get away from your shows, from your Netflix, from everything that's calling you to be in that? But I just thought, very true that when you remove yourself and you want to become present, it can become the things around you that control you the most, right? How we set up our lives.
That's so relevant. Definitely being in nature helps a lot.
Yeah. And the final thoughts is for me, when I really encountered my fulfillment or happiness, was the moment I found sort of, and I'm part of different tribes, right? People with aligned purpose and value that sort of, you want to work together on social impact, or you want to just talk about different topics. And it's so much easier now remotely to do that. But was the idea of finding out what my personal alignment is, right? Of what I want to do versus what I'm doing every day as something personal. And then something that I wanted to separate if a third of the day I'm able to work on myself, and a third of the day on career, and a third of the day on family, that's the balance I found that made me happier, and being able to say no to everything else and center yourself, which you have to be, again, in a situation where you're confident, you can speak your mind, and that way, just for me, a third personal, a third on your family, a third on career seemed like a good balance, at least for me.
I like that. I like a third. That's a nice ratio. I'll take that into mind myself. So Rima, what are your final thoughts, Rima?
I want to say it's not that hard to be happy, and I realized that from the people I used to talk with to give emotional support, people start with talking about their problems. I have this problem and this problem and this problem, and I actually don't do anything except just focus on the good things on their lives, and at the end of the session, they are happy. They are like, yeah, I have those things on my life, and I am happy to have them. So it's not that difficult to be happy. We just have to remind people what's in their hands and how can they invest those things to be happy and focus on them. And I want to say that happiness, as we started this, is how do we define happiness? Every individual, how he define happiness. Happiness is not living life with no struggles. This is not happiness. We can't reach this happiness. Happiness can be founded with those challenges, with those struggles. So we have to understand that. And I believe we talked about investing programs in our cultures. And I think this will help, even if people don't attend to reach those programs. We help in at least building the idea on their heads that happiness is something, emotional support is something that help people to evolve on their lives. So yeah, that's my final thoughts.
Thank you, Rima. Thank you so much. Shama, would you like to share your final thoughts on the matter?
Yes, sure. There's something that Adel said that I think summarized it for me. Commitment, sometimes in life, by nature, we want so many things. We have so many desires, we want so many things to be perfect. We want to achieve so many things. And when we reach that thing, there's something else we want. And sometimes the mind is so active, fantasizing and creating and wanting and pushing us forward that nothing is ever enough. So I think having the discipline to say no, when the mind's just saying no, 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 because I'm focusing on this one thing, right? And committing to that one thing. Maybe that thing is, praying to God, or maybe that thing is doing that one skill better at work, or maybe that thing is becoming a better singer, or whatever it is, but just committing to one thing. Because I think happiness begins with taking a big commitment to self, acknowledging that one thing we want to focus on and expand, rather than diffusing our energy in so many different things and then never really getting there and feeling really frustrated that we're putting a little bit of our energy rather than really our heart, So I would say happiness begins with commitment to the self. Yeah.
I love that. I love that, Shama. And I would like to say that for myself, before I close, I just want to say that what I would wish for in the Middle East, that we give ourselves permission to be happy. Because I think based on our culture, upbringing, and what have you, we tend not to do that. I will never forget, and how true they are. My sons keep telling me, "Mommy, why are you frowning?" And that has become my default. And I said, you're right. I shouldn't be frowning. Why is it like that? Because, and I realized when I was asked that question, do I give myself permission to be happy? I realized that I didn't, and that would hurt so much. Now that I'm aware of it, that's a big halfway through the solution. Now I just need to be more mindful of, it's okay, as adults, we don't have to be serious and frowning all the time, but we actually can present and be faces of joy for ourselves and for the people around us. I want to thank you all so much for your time today and all of your amazing contributions and stories that I do hope our participants will find them useful. And we do hope that this will inspire the topic to be more upfront in the Middle East, and that we are more embracing happiness and well-being and putting it on top of the agenda. I hand it over to Yesim. Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed listening each one of you and each words. I'm just recording everything to be used in the future. And thank you for everyone joining us today. I just wanted to add something about happiness. There had been an experiment in Philadelphia University. A lecturer divided the class to two groups and gave them different tasks. And one group was, supposed to spend their weekends for a number of weekends to do joyful things like attending a music concert, visiting a friend, going out with family and friends, cinema, anything that they like. And the other group are given the task to do some volunteering jobs, like visiting a caring place or spending time with orphanage kids, etc. And at the end of the first weekend, the lecturer measured the happiness level of two groups, and they were almost same. And after a certain times of weekend, the first group who attends cinemas, concerts, etc., they kept their happiness level on an average level, and the other group kept their happiness increasing and longer time. So this is very important, that when we share, when we use our skills and abilities, resources to help others, our happiness level increases, and it's a state of mind also. And really, as representing Mentee today, I would like everyone thank you, and but also just think about becoming a mentor or supportive person to Mentee to reach other people. You can visit our website, menteeglobal.org. Be happy and stay well. What is your choice to stay happy and better today? Thank you so much. Have a lovely day to everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.